Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Vasile Toch. I'm the president of the SSA, and we have called this consultation with all members to try to get to the point of having this new SCIO register with all the constitutional changes agreed. The history of the SCIO change happened after March 2023. We started talking about the need for doing this. Subject to discussions in the Council on the 16th of May, we have circulated a paper describing the advantages of SCIO and so on. And then on the 9th of June, the SCIO idea was approved, and we have appointed Morton Fraser solicitors to take care of the legal part of it. This has been happening ever since, and now we're at the point where we need to iron out anything in the Constitution which may need to be looked into, in particular the 2 points regarding the change of name and the length of tenure. Once this is done, the Constitution will be finalized by the lawyers, and the registration will be completed and concluded. So that being said, please do proceed with asking questions, and we'll try to answer them to our best ability. Thank you.
Can I remind that folks that if you do have a question, maybe put your hands up, use the hand raise hand function, so we can actually see who needs to ask questions. Okay. Okay. Rowan, okay.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I just had a question. I didn't quite understand why it was necessary to change the thing about the tenure of office bearers, the second point, the one where it was 3 years with a 2-year option, because as far as I've always understood it, that you can always leave at any point because people's lives change, circumstances change. They can't always continue for the whole 3 years or 5 years. So I just wondered what the thinking was behind making that in the Constitution.
Well, the idea was that basically someone who will take on a position in the SSA Council or President or Vice President, depending on the projects which will be generated in the future, may need to be able to follow up all these projects. And that's why a long-term perspective tenure was considered to be the point. Obviously, the office bearers have the chance to withdraw at any point in time if they can't complete, but there will be people who will be able to follow up, I would expect. And having studied what happened in other groups of artists and organizations, as Frank Toe has pointed at some point, some of the presidents of the RSA had a tenure of 8 years, 9 years, whatever time they needed to do whatever they were looking at. So that is the reason why. I think, in fact, the main reason was not to restrict one's term to 3 years, which will mean end of a certain activity, and which may risk to be not completed or not taking to fruition in a best manner possible. Hence the idea to extend the tenure to 5 years, or the other proposal is to have 3 years plus 2.
Yeah, I understand the 5 years. I think that's quite a good idea, as long as you don't end up with people doing like 10 years or 15 years or something. But I just didn't understand the second point where it was 3 years, maybe plus 2, because in case people needed to leave, because if people have to leave, they have to leave. So I just didn't understand why that was an issue.
Well, no, that's absolutely correct. And in fact, the second point of a tenure of 3 plus 2 is an option which was put over because some of the council members thought that may be a good idea. But from the point of view of how it really works, someone could just simply step out. So you don't necessarily have to complete 5 years. Nobody can force you to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've got one more question, then I'm done. I wondered if it had been considered regarding the name of the society, whether it could be called, I mean, you probably don't want this kind of suggested right now, but I just wondered if it had ever been thought of to call it Scotland's Society of Artists. I'm never quite sure what Scottish actually means, personally.
Well, I mean, Scotland's implies a sort of appropriation of the whole country. And somehow it means that we are the only art organization representing Scotland, which is not correct. A Scottish Society of Artists is Scottish, like many other groups, like the RSA, like VAS, like anybody else. So
Okay.
from our point of view, being called the Scottish Society of Artists seems to be a good idea for all sorts of reasons which were outlined in the paper which was circulated.
Yeah, I just wondered if that had been, yeah, I'll take your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I was wondering, just one comment. Shall we go through the list of questions we have with the answers we got and see if that will maybe satisfy some of the people who asked the questions?
Okay, Magdalene, would you want to read the questions out?
Yeah, we can go through them now. Just bring them up. So the first question we have here is, what are the associated costs of making these changes?
Right. Well, when we started to look into this matter, our Rick Ballard, the treasurer, made some inquiries about fees, and he came with a very good deal with Morton Fraser, which is a flat fee of £1,500. So that is the cost which is associated with registering the SCIO. There are no registration fees payable to Oscar. That's by law. So that's basically what it is. So if we have any comments from the membership, please.
Hello, sorry, sorry, Basil. Right, thank you for that. Just wondering what the costs might be. Have we done a sort of costing of what it would cost in terms of rebranding for the admin staff, for replacing, all the headings that we've got on all our things? I just wondered what the overall cost of that might be. I know what the cost is in terms of the legal bit, but the actual changing everything in the society, I'm wondering what the cost of that, have they been sort of scoped?
Well, we looked into that, and given the fact that the SSA acronym stays the same, all our stationery, everything stays exactly the same colors, same SSA everywhere as it was. From the point of view of making changes where the full name will be involved, I would imagine, I mean, I've looked into various websites for my own purpose at some point in time. It takes a couple of days to make any change you like. So from the point of view of staff costs, I don't think that will be an extra to what the staff salaries I paid for now. So I don't think that should be considered as an extra cost.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on that before we move on? Okay. So the next question is, the new constitution doesn't state member fees or the fees to be raised?
Well, the constitution of SCIO is addressing the legal framework for operating such a charitable organization, and it needs to be dissociated from the fluid financial context of our times, like inflation, financial instability, recession, etc. So the fees may change from time to time in line with any given UK financial changes, and that will be discussed at the time, and the council will take the view of what changes there may be. That being said, that also will be, and that will have to be discussed at some point quite soon, will be related to the complexity of what the SSA will do from now on for the members, because we will have more than one exhibition per year. We'll go international. We'll do all kind of other things which need to be looked into, and in context of this, we may look at raising the fees at some point in time.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Catherine. Your hand up.
I just want to ask about what you just said there, Basile, about having more than one exhibition a year and going international, because for the vast majority of time I've been a member, there has frequently been more than one exhibition a year, and there have been exhibitions abroad. So I feel that that's implying something as though it's going to be new when it actually has been happening.
Well, what I can say, I've been a member of the SSA since 1988, so basically that's 36 years. And the overall image I had was basically, we had some exhibitions elsewhere out of Edinburgh, but not many. And I can point at two, one in Dundee and the other one I think was in Glasgow. That's all that I can recall over 36 years. And when it comes to going international, I cannot recall any time when we had a major exhibition outside the UK. Now, what will happen with the SSA now, we're going to have an exhibition the size of our annual exhibition in Bucharest in October in the National Galleries there. Also, 2025, we're going to have an exhibition the size of our annual in Amsterdam. So I can't remember this matched in the past by anything I know about.
Okay, well, that's great if you're going to be able to arrange major international exhibitions, but I suppose on the back of that, are we anticipating increasing the admin staff to cope with that?
Well, that is probably going to have to happen, because if we take much more than 2 to 3 exhibitions per year and go into other fields, yes, indeed, that may be necessary. But also what I want to point out is that we are embarking, in fact, we started in January, a fundraising exercise, which will supplement the funds we need for all these things to happen. So yes, it's a fairly complex situation, and it's quite fluid for the time being, because it just started, basically. It's less than 1 year since we started all these changes. But yes, we will probably need to have extra staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Gillian?
Sorry to pop in again. No, I suppose and I think it's great to be doing a wider international vision for the SSA. I suppose my concern is just costings. You know, if we're talking about £1,000 extra for the SCIO, which I think is a good thing, and then I'm still unsure about what the costs might be for the name change and you know, website change. I know how expensive Josh was when we had to have some stuff done with websites. I suppose my concerns at the moment is to not to promise things that we can't deliver on. I suppose that's my worry financially.
Well, for the SCIO change, if that's what you're referring to, the cost even for the changing on the site will not be excessive, because they're minimal. Our logo stays the same, everything else stays the same, and to add another bit of text here and there will not cost anything in particular. So that would be covered by the staff salaries, and the staff of our admin staff, Cheryl and Lauren, can deal with it. And also, if we need to work with any of our web providers, those changes cannot cost much. I mean, I'm looking at my company website now and again, any change I want to do, which sometimes is quite major, cost me about £250. So I don't expect any extraordinary costs in having the same SSA logo everywhere, but just changing little things here and there to take into account what we're talking about in terms of the Scottish Society of Artists, not the Society of Scottish Artists, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose I'm nervous about if we're going to go thinking about eventually asking memberships to increase their fees in terms of how we're spending their money. Those are really my main concerns. Yeah, to be sure that we're doing the right thing for everyone.
Well, how we spend the members' money is the duty of the council, the president, and the vice president, and basically all these things are open to scrutiny. So they will not be happening in a vacuum. Everyone will be informed of what's happening, and all decisions will be made in a collective manner.
Okay, thank you.
And we are applying for additional funding bodies to make application funding for to fund these projects. So we are looking at other ways to increase the coffers to actually do these exhibitions. So we're not solely reliant on the membership fees. Okay, Catherine, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's still on the costs, the administration costs. Have we got anything that gives us indication of how, you know, search engines, because it's all very well changing something on a website, but we've got 100-year history, 135-year history or whatever, that we want people to be able to find. And with a name change, you can sometimes lose that. And I'm just wondering how you're going to protect that.
Well, all the people who look at our website are looking for the SSA. The SSA stays SSA. It will not change whatsoever. It's the same. So they will have access to the same information as before. But surprise, surprise, when they look in depth, there's going to be somewhere in the text to say that the name has changed to Scottish Society of Artists, not Society of Scottish Artists. So from the point of view of accessibility and the cost involved, I don't believe it's going to be a huge amount of money to make these minor changes to the websites.
I can also highlight the fact, Catherine, that I work with UHI Inverness, but UHI Inverness changed its branding 2 years ago. It was known as Inverness College UHI, but then they rebranded to UHI Inverness, and it hasn't really made that much difference on the search capacity, because as far as on the meta spiders of Google tend to cling on certain words within the website and so on and so forth to make sure that it's still reachable. So I understand your concern, but I've actually been through that myself in my own college, where we did the rebranding not too long ago.
That's great, Frank. Have you any idea how much it cost the college?
If I'm being honest, I think the cost of the college was actually very, very minimum in comparison, because we actually didn't go anywhere near the budget that we actually we allocated to. And I think it was just gradual changes, because I think what they did was that they changed the website, but the social media was still the same, and then they slowly changed the social media linked to the website. So it was a gradual change. It wasn't a complete sudden change.
Well, I could add to that, as I already said before, I sometimes make changes to my own company website. And the last one was done about 6 months ago, which was to do with some of the projects being introduced. And I pay £250 for such things. So I don't believe we're looking at any exorbitant costs in introducing.
No, I appreciate that changing a website can be done at a very reasonable cost. It's all the add-on things, the way that it's branched out. It's like we're not just dealing with the trunk, we're dealing with all the branches and all the twigs and all the leaves that the SSA has spread out over the years, and we want to ensure that they are still accessible.
Yes, well, what I can say to that is, say the SCIO was registered, the changes were made. Whoever wants to search for SSA, they do the same thing. They type SSA, and it's going to reach exactly the SSA in all its depths. They will be having access to everything they have access now, because, as I said before, the SSA acronym will not change. The logo is the same. Everything is the same, basically. It's just the way the wording of the name is changing means something else for us and for other people. But in terms of accessibility, I don't see any problems there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
But shall we move through the questions, the list of questions, see if we can catch some of the things there, such that we can go through as many as possible, please?
For sure. So the third question, I think we've addressed this a little bit already, but the third question is, have office bearers, etc., always been able to resign before completion of their tenure? So if we answered that sufficiently, or do we want to go into a little bit more?
That's right.
Okay. Are we happy to go on to question 4? Yeah.
Yeah.
So question 4 is, assuming the open submission structure will be a selection committee and hanging and arranging committee, not council and president. That's what, yeah.
Well, I mean, things will stay more or less as they are, where the president and the vice president have a role in the selection and hanging. So that will not change. Basically, it's exactly what it was before. And if there is any change in the text, that may be a mistake, which is going to be corrected if need be, if we finalize this discussion and we instruct the lawyers to finally have the constitution lodged with Oscar.
Any questions about that? Okay. So let's see, we've got a couple of duplicates there. So the next question is, who signs the charity trustee declaration forms and what obligation does this put them under?
Yes, well, if you have the chance to look through the Oscar legislation and what is it based off, you'll see, but I will just make a summary of it. All persons who are part of the SSA management, i.e. council, vice president and presidents, will become trustees of the new SCIO. Also, because the new SCIO will be registered with the Companies House as well, some of us will be directors registered in a Companies House. The advantage of that, and I'm not touching on SCIO advantage, is basically SCIO being a legal entity, the trustees don't carry any personal liability in law. I mean, legal or financial.
Any questions on that point? Okay, that's fine. So question 8 is about the name change. So we may have again already covered quite a lot of that. Yeah, I think we have. It'll take considerable admin time. Can we get a clear breakdown of the expected costs, including payment to lawyers and the time required by admin to change all the documentation and online requirements, including the necessary work to enable search engines? So we have covered that. Question 9. There are a number of things still in the draft constitution that I thought the council discussed and rejected, i.e. 39.12, the administrator shall sign a non-disclosure agreement with the society.
Well, no, that will not happen because we already have discussed it in the council in the presence of the lawyers, and that's been excluded because basically the contract of employment for Cheryl and Lauren includes this kind of clause. So it doesn't necessarily have to be duplicated in the constitution.
Any questions on that point at all? Okay.
Sorry.
Gillian's put a hand up.
Can I just check in terms of admin's contracts? Is there a non-disclosure in their actual contracts then, rather than the one?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Has that always been that?
Sorry?
Is that normal? Has that always been there?
Well, I mean, when we have mentioned it to the lawyers, the idea to have it in the constitution, they said that is a common article to be found in any constitution of a company or a charity. We decided not to do that because in the contracts of employment, we have such a clause, so we didn't have to duplicate it. Now, to have such a clause is basically prudent, and you'll be advised by any lawyer you want to ask that is the case. So we decided to take the view that should be retained in the contract.
Catherine's got a hand up.
Hi, sorry, Vasile, because I was the one that asked that question and you sent me a direct email answer. And,
yes.
And your email actually stated something different. It was more about the fact that they had a code of confidentiality in their contract rather than a sign-in and non-disclosure. And I do believe that they are quite different things.
Well, their contract doesn't have a separate subcontract for non-disclosure. Their contract states something to do with non-disclosure as such. So it's not a separate document. So when they signed the contract, they agreed to have a situation like this. So they're in a situation where they cannot disclose certain things which we do. So I don't believe that's anything complicated, and the current contract covers it very well. So I'm not sure if anything else can be said of the matter.
I think without seeing the contract, it's difficult to know, but I'm a bit confused. A code of confidentiality is different from signing a non-disclosure.
Well, it may be the kind of wording I put in my email was not necessarily to the point of what the situation really is, but the situation on the ground is that the contract Cheryl and Lauren have signed includes a line about confidentiality, and that's how they will operate. It's nothing that we want to change there. It stays as is, and as it worked very well so far, I have no reasons to want to change it.
Okay, again, you talked about it being a line about confidentiality rather than signing a non-disclosure. So if it's in their contract and they are happy with it, and we're not adding anything to the Constitution, then that's fine.
Yeah, that's the case, exactly. Thank you.
Are there any other questions about that point? No, that's fine. So question 10, while the 5-year council tenure sounds beneficial in principle, it is difficult to get members on council for the current 3-year tenure. I'd be happy with the 3-year tenure with the option to extend to 5, but with appropriate checks and balances. Can we add a clause whereby no individual council member can choose to extend their tenure without approval from the rest of the council, affirmed via a secret ballot?
Yes, well, we have touched on that already a few minutes ago, and it's clear that basically the second option of 3+2 is something which maybe is superfluous, because given that anyone could resign at any point in time, you know, the fact that we start with a 5-year tenure is not here nor there really. So if we want to stay with 5 years, that's fine. If not, if we want to decide, and it's going to be decided that we go for the 3 years +2, I do agree that the extension of 2 may need to be agreed by the council and extended as such.
Any questions on that point at all?
Lindsay, you have your hand up.
Hi, yeah, sorry, that was my question. And it's just to clarify that there's a difference between going for 5 and self-selecting to only do 3, as opposed to doing 3 and being elected to continue to do on to 5. And the reason I raise it is because it's all very well saying, oh, well, somebody's on council for 3 years, they want to stay on for 2 more, great. But only if they're contributing. You know, you don't want somebody just sitting there for 5 years who's not contributing. And you've no way of getting rid of them. So I think it's just good to have a check and balance in, so that it's agreed by council members. And I do think it's important that that's a secret vote as well, since it's very hard to do in front of somebody. So I mean, I think it would be great to have people on 5 years, but there just needs to be some regulation to it.
I know from the council that if you miss the council meetings X amount of times, I think there's a question if you should continue being on council. So there is things already in place to ensure.
Well, yeah, there is, but I think that missing 3 meetings is without, you have to give written notice that you're going to miss them, and then that isn't logged. So you could just continue to say, I can't make it, I can't make it, I can't make it. You know, so I just, like I say, I just think as long as there's checks and balances, and then that option, having it as an option to go to 5, is not a bad thing, but it has to be regulated.
No, that's absolutely correct. Thank you for that. Obviously, for someone who wants to commit to a 5-year tenure, they probably will do that because they know and they feel they can carry out the work over the 5 years and have an intention to work with the SSA, for the SSA, and bring things forward. If someone just picks up 5 years because there's nothing else to do, then very soon they will realize it's difficult, and they will resign. So it's not here nor there really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine too, but then there's also the situation where if the membership don't like where people are taking them, somebody can do a lot of damage in 5 years. So I think, like I say, not against it, just want to make sure there's some sort of system in place that people have
Well,
heard of veto.
show you that the system is in place because we have a council and the president and the vice president. And once we become a SCIO, will be, a group of trustees and directors. And that being the case, one individual will not be able to do damage because they will be kept in check by the council, by the other members of the management group. So
which is great. I guess it'd just be good to see the detail of that, how it happens.
Well, I mean, that's how the society operated since the beginning of time, basically. So no individual was let loose to do whatever they wanted. The council always had the final word in what things are done and how they're done. So from that point of view, I will not necessarily have sleepless nights because that's kept in check by the council as such.
I guess that might bring me on to another of my questions then, which was about how many members on council, because I think it was said a minimum of 3, and I don't feel that's enough to have those checks and balances. I think then we need to really increase that number.
Yes, that is getting us to question 11. Thank you, which is correct. Yes, we need to increase the number to 7. I would agree with that very much. So we'd like to make sure that will be the case. And as the situation is now, we're looking to recruit council members because some of the council members we had up to now have resigned. So we need to really do that. But yes, I agree. And I think that has to be put in the constitution.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions on any of those points? No, that's fine. So question 11, we've dealt with about the number of council members being increased to 7. So we'll go to question 12. So this person says they may have missed the communication, but I'm not aware of any statement or discussion explaining the reasoning behind applying for a SCIO status. I feel underinformed to make an educated decision and feel longer lead-in time would be appropriate for such a major decision. Could we postpone the vote until after the AGM?
Well, I feel that that particular question was already answered in part when we have described what happened. In fact, at my opening address, I explained the process. Now, it's possible this member who asked the question has missed onto all the information which was circulated. So if I can mention it again, we circulated the information and the reasoning behind changing to SCIO on the 16th of May. The SCIO change was passed by the council as an idea, voted for on the 9th of June. Then we appointed the solicitors, Morton Fraser, to carry out the legal work. Now, in terms of the AGM, the solicitors advised that once the SCIO is registered, the AGM will formally dissolve the former SSA and transfer all assets to the SCIO. So that's why we need to register the SCIO now. Then we'll call the AGM, and then that's the end of this particular process.
Any questions on that point at all?
Lindsay, you got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry. Did you say the information was sent out on the 16th of May?
Yes.
So, and was that an SSA, like a general email?
Well, I would expect so. That was passed on to Sheridan and Lauren for circulation. I'm sure that everybody got it because it was sent out.
Okay, I'll have to look back at that. Thank you.
Now, if you don't have it, I could email you it, or maybe Cheryl will email it to you. But that is describing exactly why the SCIO is an advantage. How, in fact, it's working better because basically, right now, all members, not just the council, all members are financially and legally responsible for any loss, anything happening to the SSA. When a SCIO, as I said before, is a legal entity, which means all the legal obligations and financial problems are done by the SCIO, the trustees and the rest of the people have absolutely no personal, legal, or financial liability. This is one of the main reasons. There are many others, but I will send you this, or Cheryl could send you it if necessary.
Yeah, thanks for that. So if sorry, if the society is then running at a deficit, then who would be responsible for that?
Well, what is happening is, from a procedure point of view, that trustees and the management of the society, the second the society looks like going into deficit, that has to be looked into, because if the society is at that position for a certain period of time, it would be automatically stopped from operating by the OSCAR.
Okay.
So it's quite a responsibility for the trustees and the president and the vice president to keep things in balance. But from the point of view of legal and financial responsibility to members or trustees or the rest of the management, their responsibility and liability, financial and legal, is zero. Okay. And that is because the SCIO is a legal entity in its own right. So it's like a person who takes on everything we do.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that point? No, that's fine. So question 13, I think we've covered part of this, but not all of it. So who signs as the charity trustees? Is this the president only or all council members? What responsibilities come as being a trustee, including any financial obligations, as this may discourage members from coming onto council? Also, any trustee is deemed to become a council member as of the incorporation of the society. Does their 5-year tenure start from this point or incorporate time already served on the council?
Well, the first part of this question has been answered already twice now, about who are the trustees and so on. The second part to do with when the tenure starts is the tenure with SCIO starts when the SCIO is registered. So 5 years or whatever it is starts then.
Any questions on that point?
Catherine?
Sorry, you're saying so that all the present council members and yourself as president would be starting afresh for 5 years?
Well, that is correct, because we have a new company. It is going to be a totally new structure, has a different registration number. It is a different animal, which will operate in a different manner with directors in a company's house and all these things. So it has to start from zero. That's where it starts. And we are the group who make the change. So we are continuing the work.
Are the present council members aware of this?
Well, that's not necessarily a big problem, because if the council members, once we decided which way we go, it's 5 years or it's 3 years, they have the option to go for it or resign.
Oh.
But from the point of view of how things operate, once you have registered a new entity, it stands to reason that everything happening with the managing of that entity starts from when the company or that the SCIO starts operating. So that I don't imagine that would be a surprise to anyone who has looked into what the SCIO is, what the constitution is, and looked at all the information which was provided since last year.
I just find it a little bit concerning, because at the moment we've got a sort of bit of a rolling council, you know, so it's not a sudden whole council goes out and new council comes in. And, you know, by doing that, there's a potential for sort of a complete change all at once. And I think that's quite a concerning thing when we learn on the floor.
Well, as I was saying, it's going to be no change at all, because the group, the council, and us who made this change will move on to the SCIO. So this council would become the new SCIO council. And if they want to stay for 5 years, they could stay for 5 years. If they want to resign, they can resign. We need to recruit other council members. We have 1,500 SSA members, and I'm sure we'll be able to get people to interest people into becoming council members. But I would probably encourage the council members who are part of the council now to stay with us, because it's going to be, there are going to be some interesting things happening, and the SCIO will open interesting new opportunities and so on and so forth. So yes. Any other questions, please?
Catherine?
You're on mute, Catherine.
No, sorry, I took my hand down.
Should we move to the last point, which is question 14, Madeleine?
Oh, yeah. So the final question is again about the cost to the SSA of the name change and the scale change, so we can balance cost with benefits. I think we've pretty much covered that. Just for information, I did Google Scottish Society of Artists, and it immediately came up with Society of Scottish Artists, so I think it's fair to assume the opposite would happen the same way. So that might maybe help people feel more comfortable with that.
Gillian, you got your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not wanting to be difficult, and for transparency, I'd rather we kept the original name. So I mean, I am coming from a bias there, but I'm just wondering, in terms of when we come to vote on all of this, and I think that's why I'm trying to get my head around separating out the different costs for things. If we can balance to know that the benefits of a name change and what that would actually cost, so that we can actually sort of make a balanced decision. Actually, do we want to spend that money on a name change, which is a very, it does change that sense of being a society that's based on a location, on place, a country that we all live in. And, and as we've said before, when we've discussed this, Scotland, the Society of Scottish Artists embraces all artists. Anybody who feels associated with Scotland has become a member, and it hasn't actually operated in a way that barred anybody from operating it. And that to change it to, well, it's a long discussion, and I know we've had this before, but I suppose that's why I kind of feel that to separate it out from the two issues, it all seems to be getting lumped into one, happening all at the same time. But actually, I think there's two very different questions here, and I'm wondering if membership will be aware of that and have the ability to debate and vote on that, because I think it will be important to membership. Well,
to take the first part of your question about the cost of changing the name, as I was explaining already, the name change does not cost anything, because the legal change of name will happen in any event. So when they register the new SCIO, it doesn't matter if we call it still the Society of Scottish Artists, they have to register that name with Oscar as a different kind of, as a SCIO, and also in a company's house. So there's no cost attached to changing the name, because they would have to register a name, any name, in any event. So that's part of the £1,500. Yeah, so that is not a cost. In terms of the importance of calling ourselves the Scottish Society of Artists, I don't know if you had the chance to read Norman McBeath's note on what he thinks of it, and I think he made a very good case for changing it, because we are a Scottish Society of Artists. That's what we are. And the fact that it was called in the past the Society of Scottish Artists is something which happened, fine, but I think it's the time to move on. And I think a lot of the members do agree with that, and we had all sorts of emails and conversations. So we'll have to go by the vote, but I would suggest that is the way we go.
Thanks, Basile, but I do still think a society of Scottish artists is different from a Scottish Society of Artists, and I think there is a certain sense of trying to understand that will take time and work, and it will place more time constraints on our admin, which will have cost implications, specifically if we're then looking wider afield as well as how we market ourselves as that. And I think, you know, we need to unpick that to understand it better.
Well, we have discussed that about several minutes ago when we talked about it already, and we're saying that basically the way the SSA is presented will not change at all. Is the same logo, the same acronym, everything stays the same. But from the point of view of the meaning of who we are, the Scottish Society of Artists is more pertinent than the Society of Scottish Artists, and that's obvious to many people. Now, if it's not obvious to others, that's fine. We'll take a vote eventually. Everybody will vote, and what the vote will bring, that's what it's going to be.
Vasile, I need to interrupt you here. I've just been looking at the chat box. The email was not circulated about the SCIO change back in May. It was only sent internally in the council group, so it wasn't actually circulated externally.
Well, I'm not aware of that. I mean, in my understanding, this was circulated to all parties, basically, and you know, I have issued it on the 16th of May, and that's when I noticed it was to be sent. But what I'm saying is for any member who would like to know more about it, basically, and at the time we talked about this, SCIO is not a secret. SCIO, you can find information about SCIO anywhere on the website, on the OSCAR site, everywhere. And the advantages of a SCIO versus an unincorporated charity are obvious. As I said before, the unincorporated charity we are now means all members are financially and legally responsible for anything to do with the society, loss, etc., etc. A SCIO doesn't. A SCIO is a legal entity, I mean a legal person almost, if you want, who is like a lightning conductor for any problems, financial, legal, and so on. Doesn't affect anybody, trustees, members, anything. So the change to SCIO is an obvious step to take if you want to operate in the modern world, really.
Lindsay, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, you're saying it's obvious, but then you've had several months to sort of, you know, get to grips with this and examine it and reflect on it. Now, I'm not necessarily against becoming a SCIO. I get that there's advantages, but it doesn't, because that information hasn't been disseminated to the membership. I think it's a big ask. I mean, it's going to be the sort of biggest change in the society's history. I feel a little bit more reflection time is needed for people to get to grips with if they think this is a good idea or not. Like I say, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I think there's potential benefits to it, but it just all feels a bit rushed, and I can now understand why you don't think it is, because you thought that had been shared. But this was really the first of me, you know, realizing this was on the cards. So from that point of view, I do wonder if it needs a bit more reflection time.
But what I want to ask you, have you received that information, Catherine? That's a question. Have you received that information, Catherine, in May?
No, not that I can see, but I know about it through council minutes.
Yes, I mean, you probably, if that was disseminated to council only, then you should have received a copy of that.
Well, I've been on the council, so I will have received the council minutes.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, if that information was disseminated to all council members, as I understand now it happened, then you should have received it. But that's
Yeah,
fine.
no, but I was saying I didn't receive a general SSA email. Yeah, I'm aware of it. I don't fully understand it because I wasn't at the meetings when it was majorly discussed.
Right.
And again, like Lindsay, I'm not necessarily against it. I'm curious as to whether any other exhibiting societies are SCIO.
Well, I couldn't tell you that because I don't know exactly. But if they are not, they should become one, because it's a totally different game, completely different. And as I was saying before, from the point of view, this is the most important part almost, is from the point of view of legal and financial liability, it's a totally different structure, and it's made for larger operations, for situations where we will ask for donations, will apply for funding, as we mentioned before, will not rely only on the SSA subscriptions to fund exhibitions. So our position to access funding for all sorts of sources is much more solid as a SCIO rather than an unincorporated charity, which is similar to a tenement stair society, which looks after the 5 flats in the stair, basically.
Any other questions? I think Gillian had a hand up first, and then I'll go to Lindsay. Okay. Gillian?
Sorry, I was just thinking, maybe in view of what's just been discussed, whether that is something that we need to really consider carefully. The time scale on this, that perhaps more time will need to be allocated.
Well, I'm not sure about this. I think we need to consider it carefully, because as you can see, we had a consultation which went to all the SSA members, all members. We had a total of 14 questions, and very few people turned up for anything to do with it. So I would imagine, to me, that signals something which is maybe a misinterpretation. To me, it signals the fact that probably most members are putting their trust in the council capability to deal with matters in terms of running the SSA on their behalf. Now, whoever has anything to say is welcome to come and answer. And from the very low turnout tonight, to me signals that basically people are or not interested in taking part, or they consider we as the council will take care of their interests, which we do, and look at the best way to address matters. So in my opinion, the more we prolong this, as much as we'll get exactly to the same result, it's a waste of time, really. So I would suggest that after we finish this session, having programmed it as it is, we know the answers, we know that it's the right thing to do, and we have a vote so that it's open to anyone. Once the votes are counted, we can advise the lawyers which way it's going in terms of name or tenure, and that's basically the end of the story, and the SCIO can be registered.
Okay.
Can I suggest that possibly the communication that didn't go out in May maybe should go out to members at this point, just so that people can have that bit of information about the SCIO, whatever we decide on the timeline?
Yes, I would say that's a very good idea. So it should go out tomorrow, if possible, to all members to see why the SCIO is a better idea how to describe, because it's a 1.5 pages basically lining up what and why and how it's happening. And that probably, that's absolutely a good idea for people to see.
Right. I'm just watching time, so I'm going to open the floor to open questions. Roanne, you got your hand up, so the floor is yours.
Hi again. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the SCIO is a very good idea. And I say that because I went through all this with Paisley Art Institute. I'd just like to make the point that it's very important to keep the membership engaged. Otherwise, you can get an awful stooshy and people think suddenly things have been done without them knowing. I mean, I know they probably should know about it, but I didn't get that email in May. I've just checked my store, and I always keep the SSA emails. And I just wouldn't like to see you get a lot of problems on your hands like we had in Paisley, just because people think they've got an entitlement when they haven't actually bothered to read any of the emails. So I would definitely say, do send that one that was supposed to go out in May, send it out as soon as possible, and make it seem like it's really important that people read it if you possibly can. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Open for the floor is now open for questions. If anyone want to raise anything that's not been covered. Okay, I think that's more or less it. So, okay, yep, I think that's more or less it. So, Madeline.